The council chamber felt different that morning. The large circular room on Station Viridian had always been filled with voices, arguments, and the sounds of 12 different species trying to work together. But today, something was wrong. High Speaker Zeleth looked at the empty seats where the humans usually sat. Ambassador Hana's chair remained vacant. So did the seats for her advisors, Doyun and Mira. This was the third meeting in a row where no humans had shown up. Zeleth was a crystalline being, old beyond measure. His body reflected light in strange patterns when he moved. He had led the Galactic Council for 200 years. He had seen many species come and go from these meetings, but the humans had never missed a session before. They were always on time, always prepared, always eager to participate. Councillor Vrek leaned back in his seat. The reptilian Thraxian was in charge of military affairs. His scales were dark green and his eyes were cold. He smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "They are like children throwing a tantrum," Vrek said. His voice was rough and mocking. "The humans are upset because we would not let them expand to more systems. They will come back when they realize they need us." Ambassador Lisa stirred in her water-filled seat. The aquatic Meridian was one of the few council members who had always treated the humans with respect. Her voice was soft but worried. "I am not so sure," Lisa said. "The humans have never acted this way before. When they disagree, they argue. They debate. They do not just disappear. Something feels wrong about this." Zeleth waved a crystalline hand, dismissing her concern. He had made his decision. "We will impose a trade embargo," he announced. "No council species will trade with human colonies until they return to these talks. They will see reason soon enough. Humans are ambitious, but they are also practical. They need our resources and our markets." The vote passed easily. Most council members agreed with Zeleth. The humans were being stubborn. A little economic pressure would bring them back to the table. It always worked, but then the silence began. Within days, all human communication channels stopped broadcasting. The regular reports from human colonies ceased. The trade ships that traveled between human and alien worlds turned around and went home. The diplomatic messages that had filled the networks every day simply ended. At first, the council members laughed. The humans were trying to make a point. They would be back soon. 1 week passed, then 2, then a month. Councillor Morven, the fungal collective who managed trade, began to look concerned. Human goods stopped arriving at council markets. Medical equipment that humans had designed and built was no longer being shipped. Agricultural products from human farms disappeared from stores. Lisa requested permission to send a diplomatic mission to human space. Zeleth agreed, though he seemed irritated. The mission returned 3 weeks later with shocking news. The human colonies were not blockading themselves. They were not preparing for conflict. They were empty. The scouts had visited New Sol, one of the largest human worlds. The cities were intact. The power systems were running. The farms were growing crops. But there were no people. Not a single human remained. The same was true for Nova Terra, Sanctuary Station, and every other human settlement they checked. Everything was maintained and functional. But humanity had vanished. The council chamber erupted in confusion and alarm. Freck demanded to know if the humans had been attacked. Morven wanted to know who would maintain all the human infrastructure. Zeleth called for order, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. Only Lisa seemed to understand the truth. She had traveled to Earth herself, the human homeworld. There, in the place where the United Nations complex once stood, she found a single black monument. It was an obelisk, perfectly smooth and dark as space itself. Carved into the stone in every language spoken by every council species was a single word: goodbye. Lisa stood before the council and delivered her report. Her voice was quiet but clear. They did not run away. They did not hide. They left, all of them, 50 billion humans across 200 colonies. They took everything they valued and departed. We thought we were teaching them a lesson with our embargo. Instead, we taught them that they did not need us at all. The chamber fell silent. For the first time in 200 years, High Speaker Zeleth had no response. Councillor Vrek's mocking smile had disappeared. Even Morven's usual calculating expression had faded. The humans had departed quietly, leaving behind only their accomplishments and a single word of farewell. The council had thought itself powerful enough to control them. Now they faced the truth. Humanity was gone, and no one knew where they had gone or if they would ever return. Commander Rail walked through the empty streets of New Seoul. The Thraxian military officer had been ordered to investigate the human colonies and find out what happened. What he found disturbed him more than any battle he had ever fought. The city was perfect. Too perfect. Streetlights glowed in the evening darkness. Traffic signals changed colors on schedule. The underground trains ran their routes with no passengers aboard. In the residential districts, homes stood neat and clean as if the families who lived there had simply stepped out for a walk and never returned. Rail entered an apartment building. The doors opened automatically. Inside, furniture was arranged carefully. Pictures hung on walls showing human families smiling. The kitchen had food in storage, still fresh. A child's toy sat on the floor, but there were no people. He had seen cities destroyed by war. He had walked through ruins left by plague. This was different. This was not destruction. This was abandonment, careful and complete. His team spread across the planet, checking every major city. The reports were all the same. Power plants operated with no workers. Farms grew crops with no farmers. Factories produced goods with no one to ship them. The defensive satellites in orbit remained active, their weapons ready, but no one gave them orders. On Sanctuary Station, Rail found something more valuable than empty buildings. In the office that had belonged to Ambassador Hana, his team discovered encrypted data storage units. Council cryptographers worked for weeks trying to break the security. When they finally succeeded, what they found shocked the entire council. The files revealed a project called Horizon. For 15 years, humanity had been preparing to leave. While they sat in council meetings and followed the rules, they had been quietly building something enormous. The documents showed research into exotic matter, energy fields that the council had deemed impossible to control. There were blueprints for massive ships, far larger than anything humans had shown to the council. There were calculations for journeys that would take them beyond the galaxy itself. Counselor Morven analyzed the economic data. The Fungal Collective was an expert in trade patterns and resource management. What Morven discovered made the situation even more clear. For 15 years, human colonies had been changing their economy. They stopped making luxury goods. They reduced exports to council species. Instead, they focused all their resources on research and construction. They had been building a fleet in secret, using materials from distant asteroids where no council ships ever traveled. Ambassador Lisa presented all these findings to the council. The chamber was packed with representatives from every member species. Everyone wanted to understand what had happened. The humans discovered something we missed, Lisa said. They found a way to travel between galaxies. Not just theory, but practical working technology. While we argued over which species could claim which star systems, humanity looked beyond our galaxy entirely. Vrek stood up angrily. His scales darkened with rage. This proves they were dangerous, he shouted. They hid this technology from us. They built weapons in secret. We were right to restrict them. But Lisa shook her head. She pulled up more files on the main display. These are not weapons, she said. These are transportation ships, habitation modules, life support systems for long journeys. The humans did not build a war fleet. They built an Exodus fleet. They were not preparing to attack us. They were preparing to leave us. The chamber fell silent as everyone absorbed this truth. Commander Rail had one more piece of evidence to share. On Earth, the human homeworld, his team had examined the black obelisk more carefully. It was not just a monument. It was a quantum-encrypted message beacon. When they activated it, a hologram appeared. It showed a human in military uniform. The name on his uniform read Admiral Taewon. He was an older man with gray hair and steady eyes. His voice was calm but firm. To the Galactic Council, the recording began. We came in peace. You welcomed us with conditions. We contributed freely. You responded with restrictions. We innovated. You legislated. We built, you limited, so we leave. The Admiral paused, looking directly at the camera. The galaxy is yours. We have found another. Perhaps there we will be free to become what we can be, without others deciding what we should be. This is not revenge. This is not anger. This is simply choice. We choose a future without limits placed on us by fear. The hologram faded. The council chamber remained silent for a long time. High Speaker Zelith sat in his chair, his crystalline body dim. Counselor Vrek stared at the floor. Morven's tendrils moved nervously. 50 billion humans had left the galaxy, They had taken their knowledge, their ambition, and their future somewhere else. They left behind cities and farms and factories as a final statement. They could have destroyed everything. They could have attacked. Instead, they simply walked away, leaving the council to wonder what they had lost. 3 months after humanity vanished, the galaxy began to fall apart. It started with small problems. A medical device in a Thraxian hospital stopped working. No one knew how to fix it because humans had designed it. An agricultural system on a Meridian colony produced bad data. The humans who had programmed it were gone. Then the problems grew larger. Council species realized that humans had been involved in nearly every important system. They had not taken control of these systems. They had simply helped make them work better. Now, without humans to maintain them, everything began breaking down. Trade routes that humans had optimized became inefficient. Ships took longer to travel between systems, wasting fuel and time. Communications networks that humans had improved started showing errors. Medical treatments that humans had refined became less effective. The council held emergency sessions almost every day. The chamber was no longer calm and orderly. Representatives shouted at each other. Some blamed Rek for being too harsh. Others blamed Zelith for not seeing the problem earlier. A few blamed the humans for leaving. Councillor Morven presented economic reports that made everyone uncomfortable. 12 species had economies that depended heavily on human trade. Those economies were now in crisis. Unemployment was rising. Businesses were closing. Some planets faced food shortages because they had relied on human agricultural technology. Ambassador Lisa worked with the Council's research teams to decode more of the human files. What they found was painful to read. The humans had kept detailed records of their time in the Council. Every proposal they made, every vote that went against them, every restriction that was placed on their expansion, every innovation that was regulated into uselessness. One file was especially damning. Lisa found it in Dr. Yuri's personal logs. The scientist had written it 5 years before the Exodus. We have made 70 proposals to the Council in the last 10 years. Only 16 were accepted. The others were rejected not because they were bad ideas, but because they would make humans too influential. They fear what we might become more than they value what we contribute. Perhaps it is time to become something elsewhere. A younger council member named Bora stood up during one meeting. She was from a minor species that had joined the council only 20 years earlier. Her voice shook with anger. I have reviewed the voting records, Bora said. Human proposals were rejected 77% of the time. Proposals from other species were rejected only 23% of the time. We did not treat the humans fairly. We treated them as a threat. Rek tried to defend the council's actions. His voice was loud but less confident than before. The humans were expanding too quickly, he argued. They were growing too powerful. We had to maintain balance in the galaxy. Lisa pulled up more data on the display screens around the chamber. Balance? She asked quietly. The Thraxian Empire expanded into 30 new systems during the same period. The Meridian Federation claimed 25. Even my own people requested and received permission for 18 systems. The humans asked for 12 and were given 3. That is not balance. That is suppression. The chamber erupted in arguments. Some members tried to defend past decisions. Others began questioning whether the council itself was flawed. High Speaker Zelith tried to maintain order, but his authority was crumbling. Members started demanding his resignation. Species that had supported him for decades now turned against him. The situation grew worse each day. Medical death rates increased in species that had relied on human medical advances. Economic depression spread to more systems. Some smaller species began talking about leaving the council entirely. Late one night, Lisa was working alone in her office when she discovered one final document. It was hidden deep in the archived files, encrypted with a code that took days to break. The file was titled simply, Why We Leave. It was written by Ambassador Hana herself. Lisa read through it slowly. The document listed every discriminatory policy, every rejected proposal, every time humans tried to contribute and were turned away. It was not written in anger. It was written with sad acceptance. The final paragraph made Lisa's heart ache. We do not hate you. We do not seek revenge. We simply choose to build our future, where our potential is not treated as a threat. This galaxy taught us what we are. Another will let us discover what we can become. Perhaps one day when you look at the empty worlds we left behind, you will understand. Freedom is not given, it is taken, and we have chosen to take ours elsewhere. Lisa sat in her dark office, staring at those words. Outside her window, Station Viridian glowed with lights. Ships came and went. The galaxy continued spinning, but something essential had been lost. The humans were gone. The Council had driven them away, and now everyone had to face the consequences of their fear. The flagship carrier Unity drifted through the void between galaxies. Around it, 846 other massive ships traveled in formation. They moved through darkness so complete that no stars were visible. They had left one galaxy behind and had not yet reached the next. On the bridge, Admiral Taywin stood looking at the empty screens. He was older now than when he had recorded the message for the Council. His hair was completely gray and his face showed the weight of his responsibility. But his eyes remained clear and determined. Behind him, Captain Nari checked the status reports. Every ship in the fleet was functioning normally. 50 billion humans traveled in specialized hibernation pods, sleeping through the long journey. Only a small crew remained awake on each ship, rotating through duty periods that lasted months. Taywin asked how long until they reached Andromeda. Nari checked her screens. At current speed, another 7 years. 7 more years in the void. They had already been traveling for 18. 25 years totaled across the space between galaxies. It seemed impossible, but humanity had made it possible. Deep in the Unity's engineering sections, Dr. Yuri worked on the exotic matter containment fields. The scientist was thin and tired but focused. These fields were what made the journey possible. They bent space itself, allowing the ships to travel faster than light without breaking the laws of physics. A young engineer named Junho worked beside Yuri, learning how to maintain the systems. Junho had been born on Sanctuary Station. He had never seen Earth. His entire life had been spent preparing for this journey and the new home that waited at the end. Junho asked if the doctor thought the Council understood why humanity had left. Yuri was quiet for a moment, adjusting a control carefully before answering. Perhaps they would understand, or perhaps they never would. The Council saw humans as a problem to manage. They did not see them as partners. When you are treated as a problem long enough, you stop trying to prove otherwise. You simply leave. Junho nodded, thinking about this. His grandmother had helped build the first Mars colony. His mother designed parts of these engines. Now he would help build humanity's first world in Andromeda. 3 generations, all building something new. That is what humans do, Yuri said with a small smile. They keep building. In the residential sections of the Unity, the awake crew members lived as normally as possible. Children attended schools where they learned about Earth and the colonies they had left behind. They also learned about the unknown galaxy ahead, preparing for a future no human had ever seen. Artists painted and composed music, trying to capture the strange beauty of the void. Writers recorded stories and histories, making sure nothing was forgotten. Communities gathered for meals and celebrations, maintaining the bonds that held humanity together. Ambassador Hana spent most of her time recording messages for the historical archive. She was no longer an ambassador since there was no one to negotiate with, but she still felt responsible for explaining why this journey had been necessary. She explained that humanity had debated for years before making this decision. Some argued they should stay and fight for their rights. Others wanted to compromise more, to make themselves smaller and less threatening. But in the end, they chose a third path. They chose to leave and build something new where they would not have to shrink themselves to fit others' fears. She paused, looking at the blank wall of her small office. She hoped the Council learned something from their departure. She hoped they would treat the next ambitious species better, but whether they learned or not, humanity was free, and that freedom was worth every year of this journey. Admiral Taywin walked through the ship's corridors at night when the lights were dimmed. He passed sleeping quarters where crew members rested. He passed the massive hibernation chambers where billions slept in suspended animation. He passed observation windows that showed nothing but darkness. Sometimes he wondered if they had made the right choice. 50 billion people, 800 ships, 25 years traveling through emptiness. It was the largest exodus in human history, perhaps the largest exodus any species had ever attempted. But then he remembered the Council meetings. The dismissive looks, the rejected proposals, the clear message that humanity should stay small, stay quiet, stay limited. He remembered the choice humanity faced: accept permanent restrictions or risk everything for freedom. They had chosen freedom. And now, crossing the void between galaxies, humanity carried with it everything they valued: their knowledge, their cultures, their hopes, their determination to build something better. Somewhere ahead, Andromeda waited. A new galaxy with new opportunities and new challenges. The Council would never follow them there. This would truly be humanity's chance to grow without limits, to discover what they could become when fear did not hold them back. Taewon returned to the bridge and sat in his command chair. On the screens, the darkness remained absolute. But in 7 years, that darkness would end, and humanity would begin again. 1 year after humanity vanished, the Galactic Council faced its worst crisis in history. The chamber that had once been orderly and dignified had become a place of shouting and blame. Representatives from every species demanded answers. Some demanded changes. A few demanded that the entire council be dissolved. Ambassador Lisa stood at the center of the storm, trying to bring order. The Meridian had become the voice of reform, the one pushing for fundamental changes to how the council operated. Many listened to her. Others resisted. She presented a comprehensive proposal for reform: equal voting rights for all species, regardless of how old or large they were, transparent decision-making so everyone could see how and why choices were made, elimination of the restrictions that had driven humans away, and most importantly, a formal acknowledgement that the council had failed. High Speaker Zelith sat in his chair, his crystalline body dim and lifeless. He had led the council for 200 years. Now his leadership was being questioned by everyone. Multiple species had called for his resignation. Some even called for his removal by force if necessary. A young representative named Bora stood to speak. She was from a minor species that had joined the council only recently. Her voice was strong and clear despite her anger. She spoke of how humanity had not failed the council. The council had failed humanity. They came offering partnership, but received only conditional tolerance. They showed what they could achieve, but were met with legislation limiting that achievement. They tried to grow alongside other species, but were forced to grow beyond them instead. Then Bora said something that made the entire chamber fall silent. The council had never been afraid of what humanity was. They were afraid of what humanity proved was possible. They were afraid that humans would show other species how to break free from artificial limits. And they were right to be afraid, because that was exactly what happened. Councillor Vrek tried to defend the old policies. His voice lacked its usual confidence. He argued that restrictions were necessary for galactic stability. Without limits, chaos would result. The council had to maintain balance and order. But then a delegate named Kyung stood up. She was from a small species that few council members paid attention to. She revealed that her people had faced similar restrictions to the humans. For decades, her species was not allowed to expand. Their proposals were rejected. Their innovations were controlled. Only after reforms 10 years ago had her people been allowed to grow freely. In those 10 years, they had achieved more than in the previous 50. She asked a question that no one could answer. How many other species would have achieved what humanity did if the council had not restricted them first? The chamber erupted in discussion. Representatives began sharing their own stories of rejected proposals and denied permissions. It became clear that humanity was not the only species the council had suppressed. They were simply the first to leave because of it. Councillor Morven tried to calm everyone down. The fungal collective argued that while mistakes had been made, the system itself was not fundamentally broken. Small adjustments would be enough. There was no need for radical reform, but Lisa disagreed strongly. Small adjustments would not fix a broken foundation. The council needed to acknowledge that its entire approach to governing was wrong. It had treated ambitious species as threats to control rather than partners to support. That had to change completely, not partially. High Speaker Zelith finally spoke. His voice was weak and defensive. He refused to admit that the council's fundamental principles were flawed. He blamed individual decisions, not the system. He blamed circumstances, not choices. He blamed everything except the real problem. That was his final mistake. Representative Bora called for a vote of no confidence. It was unprecedented. Never in council history had a high speaker been removed from office. But these were unprecedented times. The vote came quickly. 9 species voted to remove Zeleth. 3 voted to keep him. It was done. The ancient crystalline being stood slowly from his chair and walked from the chamber without another word. 200 years of leadership ended in silence. The council needed a new leader. Multiple names were suggested. Some were from the old guard, promising stability. Others were reformers, promising change. The debates lasted for days. In the end, they chose Lisa, the Meridian who had warned them about humanity from the beginning. The one who had pushed for reform even when it was unpopular. The one who understood what had gone wrong and how to fix it. Lisa accepted the position with hesitation. She knew the enormous task ahead. The council had to be rebuilt from its foundations. Trust had to be restored. Species that were considering leaving had to be convinced to stay, and somehow they had to prove they could learn from their failures. In her acceptance speech, Lisa spoke honestly. Humanity had left them a gift, though it was painful to receive. They left the example of what was possible when a species refused to accept artificial limits. They also left a challenge. Prove the council could learn from its failures. She said the question was not whether humanity would return. That was up to them, and they had made their choice clear. The real question was whether the council deserved a second chance if they ever did return. Whether the galaxy could become a place where ambition was celebrated rather than feared. The work ahead would be difficult. Years of institutional problems could not be fixed overnight. But for the first time in a year, the council had hope. Hope that they could change. Hope that they could become better. And somewhere in the darkness between galaxies, 50 billion humans continued their journey, unaware that they had shaken an entire civilization to its core. 5 years had passed since humanity departed. The Galactic Council had transformed under High Speaker Lisa's leadership. The changes were real and deep, not just surface improvements. But the work was far from finished. The council chamber looked different now. New seats had been added for species that had previously been considered too minor to have full representation. The voting system had been completely redesigned. Every species had equal power now, regardless of their age or size or military strength. Representative Bora had been promoted to oversee the Committee for Species Development Rights. This new committee had one purpose: make sure no species ever faced what humanity faced. They reviewed every proposal fairly. They encouraged expansion and innovation rather than restricting it. They celebrated ambition rather than fearing it. The committee also looked into the past. They found dozens of cases where promising species had been restricted and limited. Many of those species were still in council space, their potential never fully realized. The committee worked to remove old restrictions and support new growth. On the scientific front, a Meridian researcher named Rena led teams studying the technology humans had left behind. The empty colonies still functioned perfectly. The infrastructure still operated. But maintaining it required understanding systems that humans had built. Rena made an important discovery. The humans had intentionally left their infrastructure functional and maintained. They included manuals and documentation, but they had not made it simple. Understanding the systems required effort and growth. It was both a gift and a challenge. Rena explained it to the council. Humanity left them the tools, but they had to prove they could grow into using those tools properly. It was a test of sorts. Could the council species advance enough to maintain what humans had built? Or would everything eventually fall apart? So far, progress was slow but steady. Multiple species worked together, combining their knowledge and strengths. This cooperation itself was new. Before humanity left, species had been more competitive than collaborative. Now they had to work together or fail together. An archivist named Sio had taken on the task of documenting everything. He compiled comprehensive records of humanity's time in council space. Every meeting, every proposal, every vote, every restriction, every missed opportunity. The archives revealed a clear pattern. Humans consistently proposed collaborative solutions. They offered to share technology freely. They sought genuine partnership. And every single time they faced bureaucratic obstruction. Every attempt at expansion met artificial barriers. Every innovation was controlled and limited. These archives became required reading for all new council members. Future generations needed to understand what had happened. They needed to see clearly how institutional fear and control had driven away the most innovative species the galaxy had known. Even former opponents acknowledged the mistakes. Counselor Vrek, who had resigned in disgrace, gave a remarkable interview. He admitted that he had feared human ambition. He saw how quickly they grew and assumed they would dominate everyone. He never considered that partnership might make all species stronger. He thought controlling them protected the galaxy. Instead, he drove away the best allies they could have had. Vrek now lived quietly on his homeworld, a reminder of what fear and control could cost. Young Thraxians visited him to hear his story. He told them honestly about his failures, hoping they would learn from his mistakes. The galaxy was healing, slowly. Economic systems stabilized as species learned to maintain human technology. Medical treatments improved as researchers built on human advances. Trade networks reformed with better cooperation. But everyone knew something essential had been lost. The galaxy would never be as innovative or dynamic as it had been with humans present. Humanity had brought energy and creativity that no other species could match. Their absence was a wound that time could not completely heal. High Speaker Lisa often walked the empty streets of human cities. She found peace there, among the buildings and parks that humans had created. Sometimes she wondered what humanity was doing now. Had they reached Andromeda? Had they built new worlds? Were they thriving in ways the Council had prevented? She hoped they were happy. She hoped they had found the freedom they sought. She hoped that one day, perhaps centuries from now, contact might be reestablished, but not as ruler and subject, not as council and petitioner, as equals, as partners. On the 5th anniversary of humanity's departure, the Council held a memorial service on Earth. Representatives from every species attended. They gathered at the site of the old United Nations complex where the black obelisk still stood. High Speaker Lysa dedicated a new monument beside the obelisk. This one was made of crystal and metal, contributed by every council species working together. The inscription was simple but powerful. It read, "Here stood a species who showed us what we feared to become." They left not in anger but in hope. We remain not in shame but in determination to deserve the example they set. If they return, may they find us worthy of the partnership we denied them. The ceremony was quiet and respectful. No speeches, no grand pronouncements, just acknowledgement of what had been lost and commitment to do better. As the sun set on Earth, the representatives departed. They returned to their ships and their worlds, carrying with them the memory of humanity and the lesson their departure had taught. Change was possible. Growth was necessary, and fear was the greatest barrier to both. 25 years after humanity departed, the deep space monitoring stations detected something extraordinary. Organized electromagnetic signals were coming from Andromeda Galaxy. The patterns matched human communication protocols. Dr. Rena, now the chief scientist of the Galactic Council, led the analysis team. She was older now, her scales showing signs of age, but her mind was sharp as ever. She worked day and night to decode the signals. The signals were not directed at Council space. They were internal human transmissions, accidentally spilling across the vast intergalactic distance. This meant humanity was building something massive in Andromeda, something that generated enough signal strength to be detected across millions of light years. When the team finally decoded fragments of the transmissions, what they learned amazed everyone. Humanity had not just survived the journey. They had thrived. The humans had established colonies in Andromeda's outer regions. Their population had grown beyond what they had taken from their old galaxy. New generations had been born in transit and in their new home. Children who had never seen the galaxy of their ancestors. Even more remarkable, they had contacted 3 indigenous Andromedan species. Unlike the Council, the Andromedan species had welcomed humanity without fear or restriction. Partnerships had been formed. Technology was being shared. Cooperation was genuine. The decoded signals mentioned something called the Gateway Network. The Council scientists could not determine exactly what it was, but it seemed to be some kind of communication or transportation system on a galactic scale. High Speaker Lisa called an emergency council session. The chamber was packed. Everyone wanted to know about the signals from Andromeda. Should they try to contact humanity? What would they even say? A young Meridian ambassador named Jay spoke up. She had been born after humanity left. She only knew humans through history lessons and the empty cities they had left behind. She argued that humanity deserved to know how Council space had changed. They deserved acknowledgement of the reforms their departure had inspired. Others worried that humanity might respond with hostility. The Council had treated them poorly. Why would they care what happened after they left? Some suggested humanity might not care anymore about their old galaxy at all. Representative Bora, now expected to become the next High Speaker when Lysa retired, proposed something different. Not a message of apology, but a message of progress. Show humanity what the Council became after they left. Show them that the lessons learned were real. Not to ask them back, but to prove their sacrifice had meaning. The Council agreed. They compiled a comprehensive package of information. The reformed charter documents. Reports showing multiple species now flourishing without restrictions. Technological advances built on foundations humanity had laid. Personal testimonials from species who benefited from reforms. They transmitted the package toward Andromeda, using the most powerful communications array ever built. At light speed, any response would take millions of years to arrive. It was a message sent not expecting an answer, but because it needed to be sent. 6 months later, something impossible happened. Long-range sensors detected a quantum-entangled communication node activating in former human space. This technology was beyond anything humanity had left behind. It was beyond anything the Council had thought possible. It meant instant communication across intergalactic distances. A message came through. The Council chamber fell absolutely silent as it played. Admiral Tewin appeared as a hologram. He was ancient now, his face lined with age, but his eyes remained sharp. His voice was steady and measured. He spoke of how 25 years ago humanity had left. 25 years they spent building something better. They found Andromeda not empty but populated by species who welcomed partnership without fear. They thrived not despite leaving the Council, but because they finally could. He acknowledged the Council's message. He recognized the growth and change. But then he asked a difficult question. Did the Council change because losing humanity hurt? Or because they realized their approach was fundamentally wrong? That answer would determine what happened next. High Speaker Lysa responded immediately, her voice clear and honest. The Council changed because humanity was right and they were wrong. Nothing justified what had been done. Not fear, not tradition, not stability. The Council changed because humanity's absence taught them what true partnership required. Trust without restriction. Cooperation without control. Growth without fear. She said the Council did not ask humanity to return. They asked only that if humanity ever encountered another species facing what they faced, they would remember that even failed institutions could learn. Even those who drove them away could become better. Weeks passed in tense waiting. Then another message arrived from Tewin. His tone was warmer this time. The answer satisfied them. Humanity had no desire to return. Andromeda was their home now. But they were building quantum communication relays that would link the galaxies instantaneously. Perhaps in time, their descendants would know the Council's descendants not as former oppressors and victims, but as separate societies who learned painful lessons and grew from them. Humanity was sending technological specifications for the relay anchors. It was a gift freely given, a chance for connection without return, a bridge between galaxies built on mutual respect rather than authority and submission. High Speaker Bora, who would soon lead the Council, oversaw construction of the relay network. Species worked together, combining their strengths, achieving together what none could alone. The cooperation itself proved how much had changed. As the first relay activated, connecting two galaxies across impossible distances, Bora reflected on everything that had happened. Humanity had left quietly, taking nothing but themselves. They left behind cities and farms and factories as monuments. They left behind a Council that had to face its failures, and now they sent back a gift. Not because they forgave the Council, not because they wanted anything in return, but because they had grown beyond old grudges. They had become something greater. The humans departed quietly, leaving the Council to answer for its deeds, and in answering and changing and growing, the Council had finally become worthy of the bridge humanity offered, not to the past but to the future. Two galaxies, two paths, connected by the lesson that freedom and partnership were worth any price.